So yeah, today's topic is how to bring external data other than our typical universe data and one of them is being web service, how to bring that data to web intelligence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a couple of techniques that we can use to either directly get the data into web intelligence or in different ways. Maybe one is through universe. So let's get to it. So I'll quickly go through the topic and then I'll show you in the system. One of the things that we need to remember is to build a report, Webby report using a web service as a source. It has to be via Rich Client. So if you're not familiar with Webby Rich Client, it is the desktop tool for Webby. And you install that on your client machine. That's where you can use the web service as one of the sources. It has to connect to the enterprise or the CMS system when you build your report. However, it has to be via the Rich Client. So that's one of the things that you need to remember. And there are a few other limitations and restrictions to what versions of SOAP or what kind of protocols you can use to bring into web intelligence. But security-wise and those versions-wise, SAP sometimes changes things. So whenever you're using it, it's important that you check out what versions of the SOAP and all that protocols are being allowed by SAP. Okay. So now these are the SOAP, which is a simple object access protocol 1.1 is supported. And the WSDL, this is the latest documentation I have from them. The document and RPC literal, they are basically the style of the document in when you load web service in XML, like when you load the web service, it opens in XML format, right? And the type has to be the style has to be either document or RPC. Those are the two that's allowed. There are two different types of web service URLs, WSDLs that you can use to bring data directly to web intelligence. One is a public WSDL, as long as it meets all that criteria. The other one is a web service that you may have published from within Webby, within BI. It can be either published by a query as a web service designer. If you remember it from a long time ago, I don't know how much it is in use anymore, but yeah, it is something that generates a web service. With Excelsior, it is to be used a lot as one of the very popular data sources.
Hey, Renali, could you possibly go into presentation mode, because we're seeing you in edit mode here.
Okay. Actually, the presentation mode is showing up on the other screen. So, okay, do you see the presentation?
Yep, now you're in presentation mode. Yep.
Okay. So one is query as a web service designer that we can use to generate these URLs, or using the Rich Client, we can also use a Webby data block and publish that as a web service, and I'll show you how, if you're not familiar with that. And then we can use those URLs as a source of, as a data source to create another Webby report. Okay. So typically the workflow is that you open Rich Client and then you'll see a data source called web service, and that's what we use. And then we pass a URL, the WSDL, and then from there the workflow takes you through to kind of get to the block and the tables and the data points to bring in. Okay. And there are more settings that I'm going to show you as well. This is if we are using, we can also, as I said, we can also use an external web service URL. And the next one I'll show you is how you can get the get web service to build a universe. Okay. All right. So I'm going to switch to my demo mode. Do you see a webby screen or do you still see those slides?
We see the webby screen now.
Okay.
But we're seeing your whole desktop, so it's just a window on top.
All right.
You might just want to go full screen with it. That's better.
Okay. All right. So as I said, the Webby Rich client is a client tool. And when I open this up, I log in with my username and credentials. And then immediately it prompts me with this list of data sources. And if I choose a web service, then it prompts me for the URL. So I'm going to start with the external one first. So this is just one to get based on the zip code to get the. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Okay. So it asks for more details based on that. You fill in all those details if it's not already filled in. Sometimes it will just load by default. A web service can have more operations within it. So for me, I'm going to use this one. And you can see it has two sections. One is the input message. The other one is the output message screen. And then if there is any parameter that I need to enter, then this is where I set that up. For example, if I 10, then click apply. So you can see that fills in. And then over here, this is the output. So I'm going to select this and then click OK. It takes a while for whatever reasons, but it's trying to read those objects from the WSDL and kind of create a table structure and then get that into a more of a formal query mode. Yeah, for some reasons it takes a while. Yeah, it's doing something. Okay, so I had only one object, one item to select, but depending on the WSDL, if you have more, if you select more items from the output message, all of them will get added in the query panel in the result objects area. And you can see how you can change the name. You can change the name of this, just like you can do with Excel or CSV. You can change the name of the query. And then once you have all that set up, and if you need to change anything here, let's change this to a number. And then you can run the query. And based on what, how that web service works, it's going to get you the data. So it can be a web service that it takes an input like a currency from, and then it returns values in another currency from and to input, and then it outputs the currency. I don't know the exact data that I need to put for the rank, but you see, this is how the data comes in, right? So that's one of the ways you can get any web service that meets those protocol. You can, as long as you get that WSDL, then you can feed that into the rich client web service data source, and then that will create. And then you get to do the mapping, and then you can get the data into Webby and do your analysis. All right. Actually, I will also show you quickly how. So here is another one based on which I had generated a BI web service. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I can just show you one from scratch. Okay. I'm using the fashion universe, and so I'm going to keep it very simple. And once you have your report and the data ready, before you can do anything, you have to make sure that you save this report to your enterprise. Okay, so I'm going to save this here. Once it's saved to the, it has to be triggered from the rich client, but the report has to be saved to the enterprise. So you select any block your report has, and then you can publish that as a web service. And then there is a standard workflow you can just fill in, and it is pretty intuitive. And then it gives you all these server names and all the details. The default is fine. And then once you select that, and ask for another time for the name. Okay, so it's created successfully now. I had it already created with the same name before. So yeah, so then that's it. It creates a web service. And that same web service can be used as a source to create other web reports. So I'm going to save that. And the way you can find out where that URL for that web service is, if you go to the settings and then use the manage BI services, and then it's going to list you all the web services that you have created. And we just created this one right now. And this is the WSDL URL. You can copy that. And then I'm going to save that here. Okay. Then when you create a new web service, a new report with web service, again, go to a new report and then web service. And then this time I'm going to add this URL. And you can see that I have those blocks coming here. So when you create from Webby, sometimes you'll get two operations. One is the get report block and the other one is drill. So if you get two, always use the get report block. Okay. Yeah, sometimes you'll get to see something like drill WSDL block that, but you use the get report block. And then you might have to enter login and passwords to access the data, but you can also enable SSO. And in that case, you won't be able to enter the login and the password. You have to, it will automatically pick up from your login. And then if there are any other filters that you wanted to set, then you can always set those up from here. And then on the output message screen, you'll be able to see all the objects that you have published from that block. And then you select them just the way you selected from the external one. And then it opens up the query panel and then you run and get the data. Okay. Sometimes for this one, I saw faced an error called custom data provider, and you might have to contact your SAP, and then they might be able to help you with that. There's something like plugin and all that they might need you to change. Okay. And yes, this is how when I use the external web service, this is how it proceeds. Yeah. The next method I would like to talk about is how you can build a universe on top of web service. So that's another way, instead of directly getting the data into Webby, because you have to do it from Rich Client, you can always create a universe on top of any web service that from which you want to get the data from. The easiest way to do that is to use the wizard. So when you go to the universe designer, and show you there as well, you can either start from developing from connection to data foundation and then business layer, but you can also use the wizard that will take you through the standard workflow. The key is that you use the driver connection. For the connection, you use this driver, which comes under the generic, and then web services WSDL 1.1, and then you use the web service connector that you see in the screenshot. So that will allow you to use WSDL as the source. And once you do that, you give those connections a name. And this is how it will look like when you do that. Again, that WSDL can be either generated from another BI service, or it can be an external one. Okay. And then it again, you choose the particular operation that you want to get data from, and then you choose input and the output parameters. You have to fill in those input parameters either manually or through an LOV. And then you can create those objects. Then once you publish the universe, that is available for you to create web reports from. Okay. There are other few ways you can get your data from web service to a Webby, but let me come back to that in a minute. I'll take you to the information design tool. So you can see I have this one created here. And if I show you the data foundation, so actually let me show you from scratch. So if you go to this wizard, you can start here. And then I already have this existing project, but let's create a new project. And then I'm going to call that demo. And then choose the relational data source. All right. And then this is the name of the connection. I'm going to call that demo. And then when it prompts you for those list of connections, you can go and then choose this. And then this is where I'm going to feed in the WSDL as the source. I'm going to test the connection, works all right. And then that's it. So that was the connection. And then I can give the data foundation a name, and I'm just going to call that demo DF. Keep it simple. Right. So I'm going to choose this one. Like if I feed the zip code, I can get the weather out of that. I'm going to select that particular one and then go next. And now it's time to create the business layer. There is nothing much to do, so I'm just going to click OK. So since it asks for an input, so it's not going to let you proceed without feeding value for that. So you can either feed a value, or you can set up the parameter with a list of value. Maybe you have a notepad or something with a list of zip codes, and you can feed that in here. Okay. Just to get fast, I'm gonna give one, and that created, and it creates with all these folder names and everything, not very user friendly. So when, of course, if you're creating for users, those names should be changed. And then depending on how many objects you want out of that, you can change those names as well. And then that's your business layer. And then you can save and publish that. So that's the main way. That's another way you can always bring in your web service data to your universe. And then once you have the data in your universe, you can publish, and then again, it's available for your reporting. Yeah, the other few ways you can integrate your data from web service is when going back further to universe, which is if your ETL tool allows you to bring in web service data, you can feed the web service data through that, and then you create your database based off of that. And you can also use other API connectors like Simba, OData, CData, those things. If you buy based on their subscription models, you can purchase them, or like I'm not sure how many of them are free, but you can install those drivers, and then you can again build your universal report on top of that. SAP has another concept called custom data source framework or custom data provider. Sometimes you may need to get their help to get all of maybe some database is missing, some driver is missing based on what version of BI you are on, and it's there's not a lot of information or documentation out there to help you with. So it's always best to contact their support and get the right plugin or right version of some drivers and maybe some settings in the PRM files in your installations. They should be able to help you with that. The other way of getting web service data is to use SDK. I didn't go into the details of that at all. I don't do that. But yeah, with SAP Analytics Cloud, you can set up extensions and get web service data and all that. And I think you should be able to do that with Webby as well. One last thing to add to this point is that if you have SSL or HTTPS set up with your server, you might have to do some extra settings changes in the regedit, and in the regedit in the JVM options, you might have to add more details of the certificates and all that. And you'll find information that in SAP knowledge base articles. But other than that, these are the things you can use those resources for. Yeah, we already took a look at that. So yeah, yeah, that's kind of concludes the presentation. So open for any question.
Thanks, Sonali. Yeah, there was one that came in from Joshua. It was really more of a not specific to doing web services, but more a general question about using IDT and whether reporting analysts should be allowed to use the Universe Designer or not. And it's a very interesting point that I think people have been discussing for the last 20 years, because as a business intelligence tool, you should be able, as a reporting analyst, a power user, to have access to the universe. But over time, what has happened is that IT has, kind of taken control in a lot of organizations of the data per se, and they consider that the IDT Universe Designer should be in their camp, and not in the hands of the reporting analysts. There's various reasons. It's trying to say, well, we don't want you necessarily having access to the to the backend databases and writing your own SQL and doing your own joins and things like this, and you can do some pretty powerful stuff in the universe. But from where I sit, I think that with a tool like Web Intelligence and IDT come hand in hand. You can't use one. You can't really use Webby without the other one effectively. Otherwise, you end up in situations where you are constantly going back to whoever is responsible for the universe and asking them to make changes on your behalf. And that then, causes time and frustration, without a doubt. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that at all, Renali?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I'd say is it's hard to distinguish between actual role titles in general these days, but because people have overlapping skills. It is more important to me that someone who is designing or modifying the universe, they have some knowledge of the database side and joins and those understanding. I think that is more important than whether you are a reporting analyst or you are IT. And the other thought is that even IT wants to keep some control. Business objects access can be set up in so much granular details. They can always open up some part of the universe to be accessed and modified by report developers and keep some key and critical areas to them that no one else can change. So yes, it doesn't have to be absolutely no entry kind of a situation. It can definitely be opened up with some control to more users. That's my thought.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and some people have taken the time to do that. So, you know, I mean, this is part of the problem to some degree. It's historically some organizations created these massive universes with so many classes and objects in them. It was an accident waiting to happen. And so they kind of restricted it to only a few, you know, people being able to use it. But like you said, Renali, it's a great idea to have kind of subsets of universes and hide a lot of the classes and objects for different reporting analysts in different groups, you know, and give them some sort of control over their own world and environment. Then, yep. Okay, good. I don't think there were any other questions. I think we're just on time. So thank you very much indeed, Renali. I'll hand over to Lucy.